Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We are going to get started in just a moment.
It was a nice desktop.
Thanks. All right, thank you guys so much for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like people are still kind of filtering in here, but we'll start with some intros. So this is Adlucent and Uberall's webinar on marketing plan for retailers transitioning back to physical stores. And the goal of this webinar is to share some structural changes in the retail environment and what to expect post-COVID, some consumer trends, how to evolve your local digital marketing strategy, including organic tactics as well as paid tactics. Our speakers today are Greg Sterling from Uberall. He is the VP of Market Insights, and he is a recognized expert on a range of digital marketing topics, as well as a contributing editor for Search Engine Land. And previously, Sterling was VP of Strategy for LSA, which is now Localology. Before that, he's held various analyst and executive roles at Office Research, the Kelsey Group, allbusiness.com, and Tech TV. Greg is also a former attorney, fun fact, and we are really happy to have him here. Uberall has been a great partner to Adlucent, and their organic and local business listing efforts really complement Adlucent's paid advertising efforts. From the Adlucent team, we have Trey Porter. He is a senior account supervisor with us. He's been at Adlucent for about 8 years. He oversees a team of SEM and social advertising experts. And throughout his tenure at Adlucent, he's collaborated with dozens of online retailers in virtually every category. Previous to that, his specialization was in shopping ad campaign management and feed optimization. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Greg to get started.
Okay, great. Thanks, Laura. You know, that picture was taken of me last week. There's been a lot of stress in my life recently, and so I've aged quite a bit in just a short period of time. Actually, that picture is like more than 15 years old. I think I have to take another headshot at some point. All right, I'm very excited to be here today. I think, you know, the conversation is shifting from crisis response to now forward-looking tactics about how to reopen, how to get back into some kind of productive mode after the shock that has been delivered to the economy and to consumer behavior. So I'm going to do a little bit of background and talk about some economic and consumer trends, and then talk about organic tactics. And Trey will be talking about paid, and then we'll take questions. So oh, I forgot, Laura, you have to advance the slide. There we go. All right, so the big thing I think to understand is that confidence, consumer confidence, is going to be the determining factor in any kind of retail recovery. A lot of people unemployed, a lot of people nervous about going back into stores, uncertain about how safe it's going to be for them, and, you know, providing assurances to them, job security, a sense of confidence in the future, and their income is going to be really essential here. Next slide, please, Laura. You know, the data is changing really week over week, and there's tons and tons of surveys. I've selected a few statistics here just to give you a sort of directional flavor. You know, any single survey has to be taken with a grain of salt, but these are consistent with others. So most people in the United States have seen some sort of hit to their income. They've either been furloughed or laid off or taken a salary cut or something like that. So it's a pretty significant number, but on the positive side, an equivalent number basically expect to be rehired or reinstated or have their salaries reinstated. So there's optimism here. Next slide. So next slide, please. Okay, great. Most of you have probably seen these numbers from last month. They were pretty horrific. The real retail sales decline across categories. These are year-over-year numbers. They're different from the month-over-month numbers that were reported March to April, but the story is the same. Other than e-commerce, really, everybody was suffering to varying degrees and pretty significantly. Clothing and apparel retail off almost 90% year over year. Next slide, please. Again, sort of a little bit of hopeful data here. This is consumer sentiment, you know, pretty positive, and then a big drop off in April, and now some coming back a bit. And there's been a bit of a plateau very recently because of uncertainty about jobs a little bit, but we've gotten some positive momentum in terms of consumer sentiment. Next slide, please. One of the things that retailers and marketers have to think about is their audiences and their personas. So people have done an enormous amount of persona work. They've spent a lot of time and energy and money developing their you know, customer journeys and customer models, but that may be disrupted by the economic circumstances. This is just one example of a kind of alternative persona framework, which is based on willingness to spend and spending propensity. It's psychographic, but there are a lot of others, but it's something that people need to think about. Are your same customers going to keep spending with you? Are some of them going to be online? Are some of them going to come back into the store? Is there a different set of customers that you want to attract? How is the economic situation going to impact your existing, you know, customers and models? Next slide, please. So e-commerce, obviously major topic, and we've seen dramatic changes. Next slide, thanks. Double-digit growth, again, lots of data here, double and triple-digit growth depending on the category. You know, it's really a big bump that's here to stay. Next slide. This reflects first-time e-commerce shoppers in these categories, and it stands for the proposition that we've got new audiences that are buying things online for the first time. And that's quite significant because once the inhibitions are overcome, they may continue in that vein. So we've got a whole bunch of new e-commerce shoppers. Next slide. Buy online, pick up in store, something a lot of retailers were had already implemented. People were implementing it to varying degrees. You can see, obviously, because people are trying to minimize their time in store, that they are buying things for pickup, and you know, it's an explosion in this online to offline kind of phenomenon, and we're going to see more of that. Buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store, etc. This is McKinsey data that is survey of retail executives who are basically expecting essentially a 10% bump permanently in e-commerce. So some of that business that was previously in the store is going to migrate online. Next slide. So the big question on everybody's mind now is, will people come back into the store? How long is it going to take? What do the numbers look like? So next slide, please. I've only got 2 slides in this part, but they really illustrate a kind of juxtaposition. So this is a Washington Post University of Maryland survey that essentially says people are scared to go back into stores. This was in early May. With the exception of grocery stores, most people feel uncomfortable going back into gyms, theaters, nail salons, hair salons, retail stores. So 2/3 don't want to go back into retail stores, or so they tell you know, the surveys. Next slide. This is data from Foursquare, which measures foot traffic into physical locations or movements around the physical world. And this is from Georgia, and Georgia is the first state really to open up as completely as it has. And what we see in these is, you know, we see traffic to different kinds, foot traffic actually, not web traffic, foot traffic to different kinds of stores, and you can see the uptick. So as these places have opened back up, there's a kind of pent-up demand, and people are going back into um, retail establishments and restaurants to some degree. So and we'll see if that's going to translate nationwide. I mean, there's very different dynamics in the different regions and states, but this indicates this is some reason to believe that people will want to come back and are eager to sort of get back to some version of normal, even though that may take a very long time. Next slide. So what are the implications for retailers? Let's go into the next slide. There's a lot of implications. I've only listed a few here. Um, Stores are going to close, malls are going to close, store expansion will be less. We may see the transition from stores as the primary point of shopping to a kind of secondary vehicle where people do a lot more online research, come into stores to buy, come into stores to return, much more of a kind of showroom environment, much more like what the direct-to-consumer brands are doing. We will probably see more technology in the store trying to replicate the online experience or make it consistent, and fewer sales associates, and certainly contactless payments, Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal. These are going to be now go from sort of novelty, infrequent experiences to much more common. Next slide. So I've got just a few actual retail examples in here to illustrate that the store experience in the next fill in the blank period of time, we don't exactly know, is going to be quite challenging in many respects. So Apple is going to take your temperature at the door. Next slide. Best Buy is going to have a kind of concierge or chaperone to go with you. You're going to have to shop by appointment. You'll make an appointment to come into the store. Someone will accompany you. Everybody's going to be wearing protective equipment, sneeze guards, and that may be great for some people, and it may be really creepy and awkward for others. One of the interesting things Best Buy is doing is it's creating a network of third-party stores and locations where you can buy something online and pick up there. UPS stores, CVS, Michael's Craft stores. That becomes part of their sort of essentially extended store network where you can buy from Best Buy and pick up there, which was quite interesting. And then the other piece here is that half of their online sales are being picked up in the store. So this is pointing to the future. Next slide. Macy's, similar story, closing down all close contact services, as they call them, beauty consultations, dressing room restrictions. They're rolling out curbside pickup more broadly. Next slide. Which is about Nordstrom. Nordstrom is doing a lot of innovative things: virtual styling, drive-through pickup, and again, contactless payment. So this is an opportunity really for retailers to try things out and to be very innovative and to, in some ways, excite their customers with new experiences. It's not just about compensating. It's not just about defending or reacting. It's really about trying to be innovative. This is what the successful retailers will do: is they'll think differently, think more creatively, and really blend these digital and real world experiences. Next slide. So the question is the store experience going to be interesting, functional, or is it going to be really awkward and fraught and lengthy and slow and even confrontational? I mean, people have been reading stories about those that don't wear masks and come in and are looking to create a scene, and that's problematic for everybody, employees in particular. So we still don't know. We need more data, but there's a reasonable chance that a lot of people just won't want to come into the store because it's just too uncomfortable or awkward, or it's going to take too much time, and they'll be doing most of their purchases online or buy online, pick up in store. Next slide. Hopefully I'm not speeding through these too fast, but I got a lot of slides to get through and I'm trying to get through them. So what is sort of psychologically, customers want to know what the experience is going to be like before they show up in the store. This is really critical. Marketers, retailers, brands need to communicate what that experience is going to be through video, through text, through email. People are not going to want to be surprised in any way. They aren't going to want to show up and have to wait for an extended period of time. They're not going to want to show up and find a crowded store. They're not going to want to be, as I said, surprised. So the more you can do to communicate what that store experience will be like and to manage expectations, the better. Next slide. So now we're going to get into the tactical piece of my presentation. So let's go on to the next slide. What are the action items? Before we get into that, if you're unaware of these, there are 3 good Google tools that you can use to get a sense of what's going on with consumer behavior. Google Trends, of course, but more recently, Google has created rising retail categories, which show trending searches and topics by location. So you can see what people are looking for in a retail context and where and what the penetration of those queries is like. And then it also has data in the form of Shopping Insights, which is another site that you can get through Think with Google. And that has a lot of great data about brands and products. And so these are all tools that you can use to understand consumer demand, shifting consumer behavior. Might be helpful in terms of content, might be helpful in terms of some product development, or there's different ways. But anyway, next slide. Things to be aware of. So Google free product listings is something everybody should be doing. This is something. Google Shopping used to be a paid product 100%. Then they made it free, and they have ads around it. But this is a great opportunity for retailers to that have a feed to push out their products and show up in search results. There's a bunch of stuff you need to do with the Google Merchant Center and opting into certain kinds of distribution. The URL is down there, and I'm sure the Adlucent folks can give you great advice on how to participate in that. Next slide. Google My Business has historically been associated in the minds of a lot of brand marketers and retailers with small business, but in fact, it's as critical to large retailers with multiple stores as it is individual business locations. And you really need to fully optimize that profile, all the content that it's asking for, photos, video, hours updates, obviously, again, very important. 2 kinds of posts: COVID-19 post, which is really about important communication about your policies and practices, and then Google Posts. These are mutually exclusive. You can't use them both simultaneously, although you can sequentially. Google Posts is a great opportunity to showcase products and to, in fact, drive e-commerce. Business attributes like curbside pickup and delivery, those are important to point out. And then reviews and Q&A. These are very critical right now to monitor, because consumers will be giving you feedback on the store experience, and it's very important to understand that content, what their reactions are, and other consumers will be looking to reviews to get a sense of what it's like to go back into the store. Was it a good experience? Did people feel safe? And so on. Next slide. Facebook, critical channel, social media, wherever your audiences are on social media, this is a place to communicate hours, updates, policy updates, store experience, that kind of stuff. Facebook has a bunch of tools to help you with temporary service changes, hours, etc. Instagram, also really important channel. Next slide, please. This was just announced yesterday. 2 kinds of new commerce experiences: Facebook Shops, primarily for small business. It also has Instagram distribution, and then Instagram Shops, which will be also for brands. And these are direct e-commerce experiences being set up on both of these sites. Instagram had it to some degree, but this is a new thing. Facebook really didn't have it in a true e-commerce sense. So these are new, potentially significant channels for you to sell and to speak to your audiences. Next slide. Bing is very much like Google, not as many features, but quite similarly set up. Change your hours here, communicate COVID-related information here. Also important, meaningful percentage of searches on Bing. Next slide. I would also pay attention to Yelp, both for reviews and for direct communication. It's less likely that people are going to be, shopping is a big category in Yelp, but it's less likely that people would be going to Yelp first to do these kinds of lookups for store hours and other information. But Yelp should not be neglected, and Yelp also ranks in search results. Next slide. So there are a bunch of other places where people might look for information about your stores and whether they're open and other things. Alexa, not high volume, but people do ask for store hours information there. Waze, Apple Maps, and then there's sort of a larger range of directories that people might go to. And this is really a listings management proposition. This sort of broader group of sites is less important because they're not as readily consumer destinations. But it's still important to have consistent information and to have updated information on these as well. And I think that's the end of my slides. Yes, Trey, over to you.
All right, thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. Now we'll talk a little bit more about some of the tactics that we can use within paid advertising. So kind of along the same lines of what Greg was saying, we're all a little bit uncertain of what reactivation is going to look like right now. So let's go through a couple of different tools that are at our disposal for a paid search. Can you leverage things like buy online, pick up in store, things like Google Pay and Apple Pay? Kind of examine the current state of your business and see, what makes sense for you to pursue in these times. So before we get too far into the messaging and call outs and advertising techniques, I think it's important to establish that the online fundamentals are going to be key. It doesn't do much good to, bring a shopper to your site if the experience is going to be terrible. I can give a quick demonstration of that. I had a situation recently where I was excited to get an item same day. I went to the website, filtered for the product, filtered only items that are going to be available, in store for pickup. Chose a couple of things, but turned out that they weren't available once I got to the product pages. Then to add on to that, after I did buy a couple of things that I wasn't particularly as psyched about, I got an email saying that those weren't actually available either. Basically, it felt like had the wool pulled over my eyes a little bit. So definitely, I think before we get too far along into messaging and updating our ad, it's important to account for these, 4 fundamentals here. So one thing that we have done with a lot of our clients is ensure that the product feed is completely up to date. We're able to update the refresh time to be more than once a day, more than your average, as several clients have seen unexpected surges in different products going out of stock. So we can work with you to make sure that that gets updated, do a quality assurance check. But little things like that, I think, are actually going to have a big impact on the shopper. Also want to make sure that you're utilizing everything at your disposal. Do you have a mobile app? Is your mobile site, fast enough? Do you have shoppable posts in your social experience? So I think, as we're continuing to adjust every day with these unknown variables, let's make sure the things that we do are normal bread and butter are in a good place and that they are updated for this current situation. All right, so now let's talk a little bit more about the trends that we're seeing. So for online, it's not a surprise that curbside pickup is trending really hot right now in search terms. What might be a little bit more surprising is that people over 56% are actually using this for something outside of groceries. I know it's been really helpful for groceries, but aside from that, it's kind of fun seeing, okay, well, what else can I get today? So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about how we can leverage this term specifically with some of our advertising. So across paid search, there's a handful of ways we can just integrate this term. For your text ads, you can put it in the ad itself. You can leverage as a pin in RSAs. You can tuck it into your PLA descriptions. I think the key is really matching that curbside pickup language with your ad format and the landing page. So improving that quality score and being eligible when people are searching for miscellaneous item, brand, plus curbside pickup. So let's look specifically at what can be done on Google. Hopefully, if you're able to run local inventory ads and your stores are opening again. There's a really cool new beta that's been open for a little over a week now. It's the curbside pickup beta. So rather than local inventory ads where it says available nearby, this one actually says, pick up today. They have a version that's, pick up tomorrow, this week, or even one call out that will say available to order to be delivered to your store. So I think those are really cool and definitely give the shopper a heads up before, wasting any time on the site or having those frustrating experiences like I was describing previously. Speaking about, setting expectations and kind of getting ahead of any potential issues, Bing also has a really cool pilot for disclaimer ads on ETAs. Essentially, you can call out any of your store closures, store information, things that you're doing as a precaution to make things easier for shoppers. Basically, put all that information up front and center before they even have to click over to your website, just so that expectations are set properly. Either they can feel safe about shopping with you, or they know any other changes that you've implemented recently. And Facebook also has ways to leverage this curbside language. Essentially, you can pop it right into your ads. I'd say it's important to make sure that you do pair your curbside pickup messaging with products and the right creative. So, the examples here from batteries plus bulbs, you can see they're leveraging it for items that are, maybe it's a computer battery, items that are available for curbside pickup. Definitely a nice little way to call those out. All right, now let's talk longer term reactivation. So this is going to vary depending on the status of your stores, maybe the state that you live in, but hopefully, we're all starting to see some reactivation going on. Right now, I think, we'll outline these 3 key steps, what it means to come back online if you did pull back previously, how to tailor that message to your customers, and then ultimately how to leverage the new data that's available. So step 1 is reactivating some or all of your stores. Now this will vary depending on what type of local ads you were running before, but I'm sure a lot of retailers already had local inventory ads going, probably had location extension call outs and some of your, Facebook store traffic campaigns. So you're probably all relieved, like I know a lot of the other advertisers in my position are, to start turning some of these back on if we've had to pause them due to COVID. So I think kind of getting back to normal, but at the same time, not expecting that things are going to be normal. As Greg outlined very well, we're kind of still feeling things out. So it's really important to have a pulse whenever you do reactivate these. Okay, let's be really systematic about it. Let's only activate in the geos where we do have local availability, and let's make sure that budget's being allocated appropriately. All right, so for stores that are opening up, kind of like I previewed, make sure that you highlight what is available at those stores. Data quality is crucial, and then making sure that that things aren't going to be like they were before. If your stores are closed, maybe consider setting up merchant hosted local storefronts so that you can have that offline pickup option, but ultimately tailoring your creative messaging and making sure that you let people know, okay, we are open. Hey, we're starting to open. Our hours are a little bit closer to normal now. I think keeping that up to date is going to be really important. Step 2 is activating customer-centric messaging on store safety precautions. So we have a few examples with our clients here, Guitar Center, Joann's, and Nordstrom Rack that I think are really good examples of that. So essentially, just the verbiage on your landing pages, on your website, making sure that all the language is there, letting people know that things are safe, that you're taking the proper precautions, not rushing into this. Also outlining the details. It's not necessarily going to be the same experience of curbside pickup, depending on what industry and what type of products you sell. So I think really laying it out there, the step-by-step, what needs to be done, how you can make this as smooth as possible, and also making sure that you have, that you have the foundation in place, that you have the workers there, that you have the system online, that you are able to deliver what you are advertising in your messaging. And step 3 is improve omnichannel performance with better measurement. So now that you do have hopefully some of this data coming back in, making sure that you leverage that appropriately. I'm not sure if you're a retailer who was fully including offline sales into your bid decisions for online advertising before, but if you weren't previously, I think now is certainly the time. So leverage store visitors. Are you able to look at that through some of Google's DDA, through LiveRamp, other third-party tracking systems? There's options to estimate the value there. If you're not able to get that direct data, you can look at, the average cart size for in-store, your average conversion rate, and kind of back into that number. So I think having that data and then pulling it into a system, whatever platform you're using, like with our deep search product, we're able to leverage that and really make more informed bidding decisions than only looking at online data. Secondly, call tracking is really important. If you do have a call center, you've probably seen spikes in that recently. So just making sure to account for any ways that might be affected as stores open back up, and also making sure to account for that data if you're able to pinpoint, okay, this is a certain demographic, time of day, geo. How can we leverage that data to help drive our messaging to those areas more appropriately? Finally, along those same lines, make sure that you do have all of the tagging set up correctly on your site. Leverage the one Google tag, Microsoft UET. Make sure that you can collect all that data as granularly as possible, something we ingest into our system, again, to modify bids, to really make the most of this. Like I said previously, keeping a pulse on things right now is about all we can do. It's really difficult to predict day to day what things are going to be like. So keeping that in mind as you go through, it's going to be really important to make it through this. And just to summarize, be there for your client, but don't overpromise. Make sure that you do have the technology and that your data is the most up-to-date possible. Once you've had a solid foundation in place, leverage that with messaging. Let people know. People are anxious to get back to normal. So let people know your status, even if it always isn't good news. And then finally, just, leverage these changes. Things are different, but all businesses are in the same boat. We all have to just kind of keep track of this, be there for people as much as we can, and, really do what we do best, which is, provide these services and products to our customers. Let's be there when we can, and, get through this.
Thank you guys so much for that. Now we will open this up for questions. To submit a question, oops, sorry about the screen. To submit a question, you can just click the little orange arrow on your toolbar and go down to the questions box and type it in and submit it. The first question we have, it looks like, is for Greg. Greg, how do you expect the long-term implications, or what do you expect the long-term implications to be on brick and mortars in 1 to 2+ years?
I think that that's a financial question. Retailers are, some retailers are healthier than others. And I think that this sort of initial next 6 months or so is going to be pretty determinative for a lot of folks in terms of how they can adapt. I think what we'll see is fewer stores being built, underperforming stores being closed, but stores are still important. More retail bankruptcies, unfortunately, I think, but stores are still very important in this whole proposition because stores are, e-commerce declines when stores close in the same geographic areas. Stores help give people confidence to buy online because they know they can bring something back into the store. So there's a real symbiotic relationship between the two. But I think that retailers that are going to be smart about using their stores and maybe investing in improved experiences and integrating online and offline are going to be in a much better position than those that can't do the omni-channel dance as well. And but I think there's going to be a lot of pain, unfortunately, and it will accelerate some of the changes that have been happening structurally in the market over the past several years with the accelerated closures.
Thank you, Greg. The next question, Trey, I'm going to direct to you. Have you seen the curbside pickup feature perform well on PLAs?
Yeah, so I think it's still really new. We don't have, I would say, significant data yet, but what we do anticipate for these type of call outs is typically a 5 to 10% lift in click-through rate. So usually only going to be a positive. And I think this is going to be a little bit different because it is, a little bit more specific to these unknown circumstances. So yeah, I'd say we probably won't have a good read on that, but it can really only be a positive. Anytime you're able to distinguish your ad against others and have a little call out there, it's a win.
A couple of quick things to add to that, sort of proxy data points. So Google has said location extensions bump ad performance by 10% or more. That's kind of an analogy because curbside signals to people that it's obviously a real-time inventory signal. And in their post announcing the introduction of this, they said, I don't remember the time frame, but they said that searches for real-time inventory in stock products had spiked by like 70%, I think was the number. And so there's high consumer demand. Consumers want to know that if they're going to invest their time, they can get the product, and I definitely think it's gonna help performance for PLAs for sure.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think it would definitely be interesting to keep a pulse on that query volume. So beyond just the ad extension itself, I think seeing how often that term is incorporated, I think might be even more telling than the extension itself.
We'll know in a bit. I mean, this is also a way to compete with Amazon. I mean, one of the reasons why consumers shop on Amazon is because they have confidence that they can get the product, and they don't know that the product is in stock at the hardware store or at the the retailer locally. And if they start to see that the product is there locally, they're gonna get it locally, even if it means buying it online rather than going through Amazon.
100% agree. Yeah, I think this might become the new normal as we see these numbers continue to look strong, and even as stores, do become open again. I think, yeah, this extension, this call out is going to be a way to compete with Amazon.
Great, really good points, guys. Another question we have here is, will this deck be shared? Yes, this is being recorded and will be emailed out to everyone that has attended as well as registered. So you will have a copy of this, and we are happy to send it along as an attachment as well if that's easier for anyone that would like. Just let us know. One last thing, just an announcement. If no one else has any questions, we are hosting another webinar in a week. It's on May 27th at 11 a.m. Central, and it's a virtual panel featuring 4 of our Adlucent clients. It's going to be super interesting. Our gracious clients have volunteered their time to join this panel and talk about some of the challenges that they're experiencing in their businesses, how they're solving them, things like staffing, demand changes, inventory restrictions, ad budget changes, things like that. So keep an eye out for those emails, and please register to attend and join us. It'll be super interesting next week, 27th at 11 a.m. virtual client panel. If no one else has any questions, we will end here. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today, and we hope you learned something, and we will see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.